just as good as anything else, I think. This is the way I've heat treated it before, and this is the way I use it to cut on things at work and other tasks, and it worked just fine, and I think it's going to work just fine now. Come over here and air quench it, and it's going to be just as good as the other blade that I made, initial blade that I made for this knife. In the middle of reblading. It's going to work just fine. So what's happening? Well, it's about time I stopped running my mouth and got out and did a little bit of work, huh? So anyway, here's the old blade. There's the new blade. See the thickness? This is 3/16 of an inch thick on this one. So this is a rough mock-up. Typically when I do liner locks, I'll do a rough mock-up just to see how everything's fitting together, just to see where I need to take a little off here and there. One of these days I'll get so into patterns and things that, you know, I could just start drilling holes everywhere and know where it's at. But this is my second liner lock I've had. So I need to machine down, or not machine down, but grind down that pin. So basically I spent like a long time just kind of circular sanding down those two little bronze washers that are in there. I did here. So anyway, this is the old knife here. This is the old blade. So this is what it would look like with the old blade. The old blade's like an 1/8 inch thick. Now I haven't changed the spacer one bit, but I went ahead and put a new blade in that's approximately 3/16 of an inch thick. And so this knife here, I use this knife for a myriad of tasks. I used it carried it almost exclusively for a whole year. I mean, I used it to cut box cutters open. Cut boxes open. I used it like a box cutter. I mean, I used it for everything because I wanted to see and I wanted to show how my how my knives could perform in everyday tasks and how well they could hold up, being that it's something that I just made from scratch. And you know, I didn't have anything cut out. I made it all by hand, you know, from scratch with no outside help. And so if you can see this, I had two spacers kind of centering that in the center. Now those two spacers are in here. I spent probably like a good hour. I probably stood here for about 2 hours grinding those down on a piece of sandpaper and getting them to fit here. And I went ahead, once I got them goofed up a little bit. You notice you don't see the ricasso here, and I'm going to show you what I did. That little notch in there is actually the first hole that I drilled. And what happened was I got too happy on the grinding, and I ground down this face a little too much. So I decided rather than starting over again, I decided to drill it again. And since I ground the blade so high, I went ahead and had to put a new divot in there. And that's actually a small Torx screw that I fit into the front there for the detent. So instead of having the detent close in to the pivot, it's on the edge. And no place side to side. I got that lock up pretty good, and I'll show you here too. Even with minimal engagement, the spine whack test did not close this knife. So I seem to actually got a very sound angle on it when I ground it. Now I didn't take any of that scale off the inside there, but I was kind of able to do, when I created the recess to go into the stop pin up here, I was actually able to kind of aesthetically blend that in to where, even though I goofed up and you can't see the ricasso, now it comes out here. So it does kind of have a little bit of a Bowie look on the bottom, even though that is a little bit of a boo-boo I did. And I couldn't get the pivot quite to bottom out. In other words, I guess you could say there is a little bit of travel on the pivot pin that's still left. I got it real tight. It's not moving now, but I had to grind down the pivot pin, and at the female end and the male end, I had to grind those down a bit. I don't see it moving out in the future, but it's okay. And I kind of smothered the white grease on the pivot. But all in all, like I say, you know, it passes the spine wax, so it's going pretty good. But